when you were first coming out to Vegas and we were like getting dragged to all these gyms with dad and meeting all these characters and meeting people that were selling items out of the trunk of their car and
My
you
God.
know hoping no one was going to jump out before we saw the shoes and jeans.
Yeah. I I'll say based on, so like my mom and our dad are split, right? And
Yeah.
I had this strange duality right from the get-go when I was a kid of like, hmm, so my life is not framed in the Brady Bunch show.
Right.
Like, we're not in the nuclear family here. And I was just little watching TV and seeing all these families. I was like, oh, mom and dad are together and they're all under one roof. That's not happening here, or it used to be
Yeah.
like that. And
Yeah.
it wasn't that much of a negative shock to me. I didn't find that to be a traumatizing, like, oh my God. I kind of felt like for me, it was like when I learned that Santa Claus wasn't real, I found it more fascinating than upsetting. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, I was sort of like, I was like, okay, so like there's a lot of different things out there in the world. It's not the same everywhere. And life was looked very different when I was with my mother, and then life looked very different when I was with dad. It looked really different. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like in a weird way, in a surprising way, it kind of, I don't know if there's a better way for me to say it, but it kind of prepared me for the way the world actually was once I was an adult. Because I'll tell you, I had people
Mhm.
next to me that were from what people would consider a conventional family life and living situation and stuff. And they were in perpetual shock for a very long time when they went from high school into the working world, and they
Yeah.
realized that not everybody was so nice and not everybody got along,
Mhm.
and people were
Right.
hustling. And I remember them having, a lot of people I knew having these for a lack of better words, not even trying to be funny, but like they were having emotional breakdowns, realizing that things were not as structured and not as kind in the world as
Mhm.
it was in their house. They never got to see uh much outside of a hyper sheltered environment.
Yeah,
It-
no, I mean, even it's like I really didn't even think of it as being odd growing up that I had a brother in Canada. And when I
yeah.
would tell people that, they would be like, "What do you mean he's in Canada?" I'm like, "Well, that's where his mom lives. Like that's where he lives right now." And they're like, "Okay." And then, but like as I think like literally what you just said, because our family, I mean, all of our siblings, from dad have different moms, and that was just kind of normal for us growing up. So, and now, there's so many different dynamics and family systems in the world that I think it definitely has normalized a bunch of things that weren't normal, but now are normal. And even, I mean, I think when you started frequenting Vegas, I was just getting out of the stage of having babysitters
Mhm.
and like nannies. And one of the things that now that I'm older and I remember, it's like, as crazy as it seems. And again, now that I'm adult, no one has ever told me if this was true or not. So it just is a standalone story in my brain, right? As I'm
Welcome to my
sure
life.
yeah, you have
Yeah.
many of those too. Like, was that actually real? But I had this nanny for months, like, gosh, probably a year. And suddenly, out of nowhere, she quit coming around. And later on, I figured out that she was an under. And I was like, where did this lady come from and where did she go? But I was in high school, so I didn't like ask, very many questions. But then like it was just one of those things that like nobody ever talked about it. It came up and then it died. And like I never heard of it again. But it's just like little things like that when you and I like tell some of these bizarre stories, or when the cop that looked just like Gary Coleman's twin showed up at the door. I think you were in town for that.
Yes.
Nah, it's just like, like you can't make this stuff up, but it was so normal for us. And
No. I know it was it's just insane. It's just crazy. I remember
Oh,
I remember uh, going back to where my mother lived up in Canada, where I was at, and people be like, "So, what did you do aside from seeing family? What'd you get up to?" And I was like, "Oh, we went to a lot of like went to like Sugar Ray Leonard's boxing gym and
yeah.
met Roger Mayweather and saw all these famous fighters down there." And they were like, "Get
Hmm.
the fuck out of here! Tell me another story." I was like,
Yeah.
"No, really, like."
Yeah, really.
And
Yeah.
like when Rico was down there and Kevin
Hmm.
Randleman before he passed away, bless his
Yeah.
soul, all those people, and you try to, people ask you, and it just got to a weird place where I was like, unless people know me really, really well, I don't think I can
Hmm.
tell people these things because they sound too far
Yeah.
fetched because no one's around professional athletes or people on TV. So they're just like, this person's making stuff up. And it was like, that was really our life when we were around
Yeah.
dad. He was in the
Yeah.
thick of it all.
I was thinking about Rico yesterday, just what a character he was, and like growing up around people like him and getting to meet Kevin Randleman and be around him and all those guys. And I was just like thinking about, and going to those gyms like Richard Steele's and Ricardo's and all the different people that would be in there.
Remember the
But
science gym that John Wood had?
yes, the Zion's gym. Also, remember when we were obsessed with those drinks?
Yes.
I'm mad that they disappeared, but I guess, whatever, whatever. But I was thinking, I was like, I think one of the things that really helped like give us an idea of what it actually looks like being at the beginning of the road, the beginning of the journey. Because some of those guys, as well as I know, like guys like Forrest Griffin, like he was homeless, sleeping out of his car, just waiting for the gym to open so that he could take a shower,
Yeah.
and like guys like Rico was here, there, upside down, diagonal, all over the place.
Yeah.
And and then the other character, which I don't know if Phil's name can be said out loud, but and his dad, I don't know. I always get weary talking about him out
I
loud because I
know.
don't know what he's involved in. But
Right.
guys like that, it's like the I think like they were really like pioneers of early UFC and pride fighting, like when people were still like stepping on people's heads. And like that was, bizarre. You think about it now, but like those guys were doing all that crazy stuff. So it makes sense that they were all, a little loony.
Yeah. I even remember, I remember there was a guy named Mauricio Veo who moved from Chute Box, Brazil, up to Canada, and he was teaching at Toronto BJJ, um, which was supposed to be a jiu-jitsu school, but they were expanding into MMA. And then he opened up his own school called Evolução, which is like Portuguese for anything goes. They were this Mauricio guy was teaching a Vale Tudo system. I remember like when I was learning this stuff away from when I was with you and dad, we had whole classes on how to stomp people's heads. Could you imagine? Sign up for kickboxing, sign up for boxing, jujitsu, soccer kicking head class. And I'm like, I will go to MMA gyms now recreationally when I'm traveling just to stay in the mix of
Yeah.
it. And I'm just like, I remember when they had a soccer head kick class. Now they're just doing, they're just doing, cage wrestling against the fence or the cage control.
Yeah.
All of the weird
Yeah.
things that have changed and the things were, the different
Yeah.
renditions of all of this is
I
crazy.
know, I know. I mean, even like, gosh, the umpteen times, how many times they changed like the way you could elbow people. Like when it was a free for all, people were getting like elbowed square in the temple,
Yeah,
and like the sport. I mean, and but then you also had the guys that were like the Vanderlei Silvas, like the guys that like the Ken Shamrocks, the Frank Shamrocks that were like fighting covered in blood.
yeah,
And I feel like that added a different element to the sport that not to say like they needed to be covered in blood to bring it to life, but it certainly helped.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I feel like I see when I see your clips and your posts, I get almost nostalgic because I see like how you've studied forever and so long and so many of these things and like take different pieces of different parts of things that we were around and have formed it into your character. And
Yeah.
to me, like that's just so cool. And I get like again, like I said, it makes me nostalgic in so many good ways.
I definitely have realized just over the last couple of years that I've taken things subconsciously, different experiences in my life and different people and characters I was around and different environments I was in. And I've drawn from those places to bring a combative character to life in the ring for people to enjoy. And I think your imagination can only, I guess it's per person, a case by case, the artistry of it all, but a person's imagination can only stretch in so many different directions so far and so long before you have to draw from experiences that you've had in life. Like, for example, you could take like a dark fantasy film where they have ghosts and fairies and you're in a new land that doesn't exist and instead of trees they have candy canes or something. I mean, that's imaginative, right? You can't ever go to a place
Right.
like that that exists. But then if you look at another film where it's a broken home film, chances are the person who wrote that was either a psychiatrist or recreationally or maybe professionally studied sociology and studied psychology, or came from a broken home. That's how you're able to write so intimately about stuff like that.
Yeah.
They're drawing from experiences or educational papers that they read. No one ever really feels inclined to do a drama, let's say, about a broken family,
Mhm.
unless they kind of came from one or they were fascinated by the dynamics of the household through research papers. But for me, I think definitely all of the practices and all of the street fights and all of the other crazy stuff I did played a role in developing that character, definitely with some imaginative concepts.
For sure. Yeah. And it makes sense too, because even like, the more I start to learn about the nervous system and the brain and the more I understand how we project we as humans we naturally it's hard for us not to project and not to want to recreate feelings that gave us feelings of happiness and joy and nostalgia, kind of like I said. And our brain, especially when we're someone who's constantly in this fight or flight or freeze mode, when our brain sees the opportunity to recreate a moment of joy, it pulls at it. And to me, as I've, continued to learn more and more about this nervous system and the brain and performance, I think like again, like I find so much enjoyment now watching so many different types of performances and performers because I can see, oh wow, like they're pulling from this and they're achieving that, and they're pulling, from this and they're achieving that. And I think it's incredible.
Yeah, I agree with that. That is definitely a process that I think many people use across the boards for sure. For sure. You know, I don't know why I had it in my head as a kid to be this way. And I have to kind of like I still find myself struggling with this as an adult, but I think I was so concerned as a kid to not be a bother and not ask for help about anything, that I developed this. I don't want to call it an issue, that's a strong word, but I developed this tendency where I still have a very hard time asking for help. And like when we were around, parallel to that, when we were around all these famous people growing up, or people that were going to become famous that we didn't know were going to become famous,
Yeah.
I never asked for a fucking picture. You have more
I
pictures than I
know.
do. You have more pictures than I do, but neither of us ever really did that. But like, I'm glad you
Yeah.
have the pictures with everybody because, like, some of them have passed away. And when you're young
Yeah.
and you haven't been to a lot of funerals yet, you kind of
Yeah.
like innocently take the time for granted. And I wish for the sake
Right.
of not being able to see them or talk to them anymore, I could have got a picture. Like,
Yeah.
Dad one time, well, could have been many times. I was around Mark Kerr one time when Dad was around Mark Kerr, and I
Yeah.
remember just meeting him, and um, I remember when Dad said hello and talked to him for a little bit. I looked at Dad, and Dad looked at me, and Mark was huge at this time.
Yeah.
And Dad just went because he was so fucking big. He was so
Yeah.
fucking big. We didn't even want to say it out loud. We just kind of had a visual cue, like his neck is huge. Like he shook
Massive.
his head, but he was
Yeah.
so fucking big. And then I never
Yeah.
saw him again until I was an adult. And finally,
Hmm.
I was like, he was at a restaurant in the hotel at WrestleMania in Philadelphia 2 years ago. I said, I'm getting my fucking picture
Yeah.
with Mark Kerr. I'm telling him
Yes.
where and when I met him. I was
Yes.
like, I got it. I punched through that weird thing that I had.
Yes. Yes. No, I think I totally relate with that. I even almost like didn't even ask you to do this because I was like, "Ah, I don't want to be a bother. Like he's got, it's probably the first time in so long he's got time off and here I am asking, for, time." But I also like I had to do the same thing. I was like, your schedule could be unpredictable. We may never have another opportunity to do something like this. I was like, I'm gonna be selfish for once and ask to have the conversation, record it, make, memories of it, talk about memories in it, and do that because I think it's so easy to get caught in that place of not wanting to ask for advice or help. And I've got to like get out of my own way and asking for guidance in some areas. And I think again that because and and maybe this twisted way that we grew up in the culture of like if you don't ask questions then you don't know the answer and you can't get in trouble has kind of bled into the rest of the way that we process. And I
You're
think I
totally right.
think that's what happened there.
Yeah, you're totally right. I will confess something out loud right now that maybe if anyone's listening, they can take something from this. It was a lesson, and it took me, oh my goodness, it took me 8 or 9 years to really figure out. So, I was a bouncer for a long time, and I moved up the ladder and got into management positions, assistant director, director, or whatever. I did that for a long time. Truth be told, Taylor, the only reason I was doing that job was because, like, the main reason, there were several reasons, but the main reason I was doing that was I tried working over 40 hours a week. I would work 60 hours a week at regular jobs when I was growing up in my 20s, and I still was barely getting by. And the world is still like that in a lot of ways. When
Hmm.
I went and worked 3 nights on the weekend, I was making more money than I was working 60 hours at a regular job. And I
Yeah.
was on my feet at the regular job for long hours. I'm tall. I'm always working out. I'm always sore. I'm indoors. I'm under these fluorescent lights that are burning my fucking eyeballs out, give me a headache every day. And I
Yeah.
was like, I can handle this. It's not that I can't handle it, but at the end of the week, I'm barely just getting by after my rent and my food. I have no ability to save money doing this. And I was trying to think about my
Yeah.
future self. I was like, I'm never going to be able to get a car. It was a problem, right?
Yeah.
So I stuck with the bouncing because the bouncing put me ahead. I still worked during the week. I
Right.
still did all of that.
Right.
Um, but the comfortability that I provided myself was when I was bouncing, if I really didn't like the treatment of the job that I was at, or the job was really just killing my soul, I could submit my 2 weeks notice and get another job because I had my weekend job. So my bills were
Hmm.
covered and everything was fine. I didn't mind working a lot. I liked it. I liked being busy. It made me feel safe to have
Yeah.
a lot of work.
Hmm.
But really, I really beyond the financial stability that bouncing had provided, I really didn't want to be doing it because after a while it screwed up my sleeping patterns, and at
Yeah.
times I felt like a glorified babysitter for people with a false sense of entitlement to behave like jerks because they were spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
I could have I could have found other work if I just asked for help.
Hmm.
And I never did. I stayed
Yeah.
in a series of occupations for almost a decade because I didn't ask for help. And so
Yeah.
I just, without elaborating beyond that, because it'll just be more of the same, for anyone who's listening, like, I think at certain points we have to identify that, in ourselves, that it's not a problem to ask for help. And
Mhm.
if you ask for help and somebody snaps at you about asking for help and tells you that figure it out for yourself, or you're begging or something like that, you're talking to people who are struggling with self-love issues and projecting that back at you for asking, for something that they're not really able to provide or don't think you should have it. And that's a whole other can of worms of why they have a
Yeah,
perception of why you
definitely.
shouldn't have
Yeah.
something.
Right.
And it's hard in life when we're all bumping into each other when we're working through stuff. We don't know how to identify these issues.
Hmm.
It took me a long time to figure that out about myself. And I just, the way I structured it in my mind to make myself comfortable to ask for help is I would say, I have work ethic to offer, and
Hmm.
I'm going to be a benefit for someone if I can get this position or this job. I'm not asking for a handout. I'm actually asking for a position somewhere to work very, very hard, and someone's going to reap the reward of that. So I'm not a bother to ask for
Yeah.
help. So that's how I would begin to frame it as I got into my early 30s. And all of these working opportunities opened up, and I realized they were there the whole fucking time. I didn't know how to frame around these mental blocks that I had.
Hmm. I think, one of the things that, and I know that you've never been the poor me victim guy ever. And I know this is why you've like never brought it up. But I think one thing that so many people don't know, just because you've never really openly talked about it, but how hard life was, in the chunk of years that you did just move to Vegas and you were
Oh,
kind of getting your feet underneath you and you didn't have a car and I helped you get a different place to live during other situations and then at another point in your life when I had helped you get a different place to live, it's like these times of struggle, um had you not asked, just called me on the phone, said, hey, I need just a little bit of help right now. I mean, Lord knows how different your story would have been. And I think because people don't know how crazy that time of your life was, like I do, because I
yep,
was like in the thick of it. And also like during that time I felt and I know we've talked about it before, but like the protector in me, there was a good chunk of time where I was like trying to protect you.
yeah,
And, and it makes that like logically doesn't make no sense. Like you were grown and, could handle yourself, but I felt this big responsibility in making sure that like you were okay.
yep,
Um, and I think it's so easy to run past the importance that all it took for you was just to ask. And I share that because I know when we feel in the deepest, darkest time, that's when, the hole closes in and we feel like we're stuck in this box and it would be absolutely impossible to ask anyone for help. But, because you did, because honestly, because you had just that little bit of strength in you to kind of dig deep on and rip the blanket off, it grew into so much momentum
yep.
for you. And I think that's like the hidden character behind the door, right? If we leave it shut, we'll never know all the strength that's there. But because we tap in and we open that door, there's so much more out there when we can, convince ourselves that there's more behind the door.
Very well put. And I completely agree. It's, with the door analogy or metaphor, it's like we're surrounded by doors in life, right? And some of them are easier to open than others. And there might be this
Mhm.
one door that you really have to get through, and it's very locked, and it's not exactly one that
Yeah.
you can. it's not exactly one you kick open, or nor do you want to. That's not really the way you want to proceed. If you have the courage though to knock and somebody can just crack it open a little bit, when they do that for you, just be prepared that when you're passing through, be willing and be able to build them a whole new house. You know,
Yeah.
create a whole new world for everybody on the other side of that. You know, be sincere with your intentions. Don't loiter. If they're gonna let you in, you know, be a lift, not a
Yeah.
load at that point. And I never forget that, Taylor. I never, literally never forgot that. You know, in a weird way, as hard as it is when you go through all of that with all of the variables and uncertainty, you learn that you can hang in long
Hmm.
periods of uncertainty, and that can provide you a comfort if you have to go through long periods of certainty again later in life. And you
Yeah.
never know if you can until you go through it. And you never know
Yeah.
what will happen, like if you ask for help, unless you ask for help. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember. I feel like during those crazy transitions, that's when you were just getting involved with FSW, right? That was like the
mhm,
beginning of the FSW time. See,
yes,
even that, like, and again, like there's so many layers there, but I think that's also like why you've been such a role model to me growing up because like in the face, front of the face, seen all the challenges. And even in those crazy times, you were still chasing that dream. And there was still like the keep going in your head when, you know, it's like, it's incredibly hard to hear that voice when everything else is yelling at you.
yeah. It's in the back of my mind, I've always tried to be cognitive of just remembering that these things that are so far away that you'd like to do or like to be a part of, everyone has a long way to get there. And anybody who had a short distance to travel to get there usually doesn't stick around because they're missing the foundations to be able to hang. It's almost like you get the reps or like you build the endurance to hang there if you take the long route. If you
Yeah.
take some sort of shortcut, it's like you don't have the fortitude to be able to remain in a place that you want to be, because usually places that you want to be that take a lot, there's a pressure involved with staying. It's like
Mhm.
any sort of like high level sport, or like a job that is involved, you know, or associated with a lot of money. That means there's a lot of responsibility and accountability, and in order to be able to manage the responsibility and accountability of that type of job, you need to have foundations and the understanding of information and literature to be able to retain it, explain it. I just feel like the long road is the best road. I really, really do, like in all aspects of life. But
Yeah.
you know, it's tough. So anytime anything's ever tough, I kind of feel like, well, I'm probably in the right place. If this is
Hmm.
tough right now, I probably am doing it the right way. I just
Yeah.
need to be able to hang in this position. If it's too easy, I feel like something's about to go wrong. And it
Yeah.
usually does. It usually
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think yeah, I love how you your last YouTube documentary, the big work, part two. I think all the gosh, all the things you intertwined in that was right on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
An unexpected series of events. What can I say? But that is life.
Yeah.
That is life. It never stops being unpredictable. You know, what do you do when, you know, this place you've always wanted to be since you were a little kid watching it from the audience decide, you know, it's what's the best elegant way to put it?
Hmm.
It is no longer the place that it was yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're doing things differently, or you know, are you willing to turn a blind eye and subject yourself to situations and circumstances that you don't agree with for the sake of being there and the status of
Yeah.
it? You know, I know a lot of
Yeah.
people who in my industry they don't like things that are going on around them. But the idea of going back into the world and not being able to say they're an XYZ wrestler,
Hmm.
and the status that's associated with the letters in front of the wrestler, like if they don't have that, they're almost embarrassed to say that they do this for a living. Because
Yeah,
if it's not WWE, most people go, "Where do you wrestle?" You know what I mean? They're like,
right.
"What the hell is that?" For me, I've
Yeah.
never like that's never really bothered me, because when I was wrestling in Vegas for smaller companies, and even outside of Vegas, I could show people material on my phone and they would become interested.
Hmm.
And I could turn somebody who wasn't even a fan into pro wrestling into a fan that's going to now go get a local live ticket. But
Yeah.
for some people, they really need that. I'm this wrestler for this company. And people go, oh, and that means a lot to them. And I'm not throwing
Yeah.
shade at them. So that's where they're at in their life and they need that. But
Yeah.
I, they're willing to eat a lot of shit to be able to say that. And to me, it's like, no, I can't do that. I
Yeah.
can't do
Well,
that.
I think that's a lot of workforces. And I think I think I almost fell into that trap too, working in the rehab space. Like I kept chasing, I want to run the facility. I want to run the facility. I want to run my own facility. And I had, created this fantasy about getting to this place. And then once I got there and I was running the facility and I was, making the bigger paycheck, I was like, dang, like again, like kind of finding out Santa Claus isn't real,
It-
and you're like, wow, I've been, working the 60-hour work weeks. I've been doing the overtime. I've been, taking 2 a.m. calls. And you get to the top and you start looking around and you're like, okay, now I realize 40 pounds overweight. I haven't been to the gym in months. I'm, neglecting all my self-care. I haven't seen my family in weeks. And for me, that was that experience. And it was like I just fell in that trap of chasing the title. And now I'm in this different space, a creative space where I have honestly gotten to a point where I can take everything from a little bit from all of my experiences from I can take from growing up with athletes, from learning so much about psychology and being around so many therapists, and kind of pulling from all the operational jobs I've done. And honestly, even sometimes the security work, sometimes I'm breaking up fights, with
yeah,
coaches and whatever. And now it's like, again, kind of like you said, if it's when it feels uncomfortable and it's starting to feel hard, it's probably right. And when I got here, I was very uncomfortable. I felt like a fish out of water. And I was like, gosh, like, what am I doing? I just left, this job that I chased for so long. But now, like, I get here and I feel like I'm living, in a dream, and I get to do things that, you know, I love every day, and have different conversations and just learn a little bit more about humans every day, and that fuels the fire for me.
I love that you said that. There's there's something that happens. There's something that happens to everyone if they're fortunate enough to get into this position, and people will never know what it feels like until it happens to them. So I spent many years financially, in my 20s, being behind where I wanted to be, just to be comfortable, not to be
Mhm.
wealthy, just to be comfortable so I didn't have to look at my bank app every time I went to Starbucks to see if I was able to
Right.
get a coffee, right? Everybody
Yeah.
kind of knows what that's like if you grew up in the working class.
Yeah.
So the mentality is like, when you're in that grind, you're like, well, this is what it's like. And somebody said something to me that I don't like, or something happened at work that I don't agree with, a lot of people will say, I need to clear this check or else my whole life goes off the rails, and I got to roll with this.
Yeah.
But if you are fortunate enough to get to the point where you are financially secure, and by financially secure, I don't mean wealthy. I just mean
Right.
you're in the green now. Like you could save money. Let's put it that way. You get into a position where you can save money. When you start seeing those same things, happening in your working environment and people are saying things to you that they shouldn't be saying to you, you realize like the financial security does not outweigh my self-worth and my integrity. And I need to be okay with how people are going to speak with me and how I'm going to respond and what I'm willing to get up to go to every single day, like, in the morning.
Right.
And I know it's not that easy to just switch occupations and working environments and stuff like that for people. Like I remember what that's like, but I wish people could know what that feels like. I wish everybody could know what that feels like to be able to just get ahead just enough where they can leave an unhealthy environment and realize that they would be happier missing a few bucks than
Hmm.
to stay convincing themselves that they need this money. And again, it's not easy to switch occupations, just go work wherever you want. Sometimes the jobs are not available, but like that's a very powerful thing in a person's self discovery when you begin to realize like, oh yeah, obviously money is essential to our livelihoods and survival and keeping the roof over our head, but like, man, if you do get enough of it and you have it,
Hmm.
you will turn back into yourself to take care of yourself and protect yourself from nonsense going on around you. Like, or at least in my opinion, you should like to stay somewhere clearing money that is disrespecting you or
Hmm.
doing practices that are not good for you to be around. It's as I've gotten older, I've realized, and I've made the mistake to stay in other occupations longer than I should have, seeing a lot of that stuff. It's not good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. I think money easily shows up as safety. It's disguised as safety. And, especially when you're, like us and you are someone that doesn't want to ask for help. And again, going back down that rabbit hole, but you start to feel like, okay, if I have this, then, I'm self-sufficient and I can do things on my own if I just have that. And
Yep.
that's the trap. And yes, it is essential and we need money to live, of course.
Yeah.
But like you said, there's a difference between, I think, being, I guess responsible is what's coming to me, but there's responsible and then like right over like right when you run completely past responsible we get to greed
Hmm.
and there's a bunch of layers in between that but it's so easy to pass responsible, okay, I'm responsible now, let's do more. And similar with different you know journeys through addiction, but it's like, okay, I'm responsible, this is recreationally fun, let's do a little bit more and then a little bit more, and then it's easy to fall into that place of greed. But I think again it's like kind of like one of those things where I'm grateful for the people and the interesting characters that we grew up around because we could kind of see a little bit of everything. We could like, I mean, gosh, the countless amounts of people that we knew that started from nothing, got a lot of money and blew it all. The countless amounts of people that started, from nothing, got a little bit of money and lived in scarcity their whole life and never did anything fun and just stayed in the cocoon and then, and passed away. I think we've kind of seen a little bit of everything. And I think like you've really found what would appear to me from, afar as a good happy medium.
Big time. Yeah.
Yeah.
The staying away from the obsession of materialism. Like, give me an example. So I'm very careful how I bring this up because so many things are always taken out of context and they don't understand. Sometimes people are very committed to misunderstanding people, by the way, as well.
Oh,
So
yeah. Oh, definitely.
that happens in my space all the time.
I'm
Um,
sure.
so my Dodge Challenger, the black one.
Yeah.
So love that car. Took it everywhere. I had like an emotional connection with that car.
Yeah,
Um,
no, definitely. And I would understand why.
Yeah, I drove all over the United States with that car to all of my
Yeah,
shows and took the car from Las Vegas to Florida when I went to WWE NXT.
yeah,
So that car was from 2014. This year, that car pretty much croaked. I was so devastated. In order
dang.
for me to repair the vehicle just to a baseline functionality where it's safe for me to get in and safe for people to be around me, I would have had to have spent as much money on that car
Oh,
as it was to buy a new one.
dang.
So I was like very upset about that. But I was like,
Yeah,
okay, I'm in a position where I'm able to get a new car. So I got a new car and I got a very nice one. And I realized, you know, when I get in the car, and this is the first time I bought a really nice car. Not that the Challenger was a shit
yeah,
car, but it was a stock model.
sure.
I got in this nice car and I was like, I'm not one of those people that felt like I ever needed this. And if I'd gotten a
Mhm.
regular four-door sedan that was like a $20,000 car, I would have been just as happy. And
Yeah.
that was like a moment for me where I realized I was like, okay, I feel like I'm doing this right. I didn't
Hmm.
feel like I needed this car. I just thought like, man, I never spend any money on myself. I never really do anything
Yeah.
for myself other than like
Yeah.
get a massage or go to yoga. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, never
Yeah.
fucking
Yeah.
I never really, like I'm always prepared for that rainy day. So I put everything
Hmm.
aside, you know, and I got the car and I'm glad that I got the car, but I
Yeah.
didn't feel like it was an essential purchase whatsoever. And I just thought like I thought about that over and over and over again. And I was like, is
Hmm.
something wrong with me? I'm like, no, there's nothing wrong with me actually. This is probably a sign of good health, of good mental health. Like
Yes. Yes, yes,
so
yes. I'm so glad that you didn't feel bad when you got into the car. And I think Joey's getting into that space too, where he gets like a buyer's guilt.
oh yeah.
And he's kind of the same, he's not like buying things for himself all the time. It's usually, back into the business and, all of that. And I feel like that's kind of, same for you. Like you're put your money like back into yourself as far as like self-care goes, like the massage or yoga or your food.
Yep.
Um, people may not know how much you eat, but it's you're not over there skipping meals.
Can I show you how disturbed I am? So I'm doing my usual wake up and fasted cardio. I have
Oh
an
no.
iced Americano and I have an
Oh.
espresso on the side.
Oh my gosh. Oh
And
no.
by the way, it is just Dunkin' Donuts. It's nothing fancy, guys. I have very low standards of coffee.
Oh
Still the
geez.
same.
God
I have
bless
all
it.
of, I've done pretty good for myself. I'm still the same though, and I'm
Yeah,
happy.
no, well, and I was so happy too when you guys went and traveled and did the Sea-Doo thing for your birthday that one year. I think it maybe 2 years ago now or
Yeah.
the something like that. But I thought that was so cool that you were finally like doing something like really fun for you because I know like that you almost never do that. And I was like,
No.
heck yeah, like deserved. I was so happy. I thought that was so cool and that, you could get out and do something for yourself. And I thought that was really sweet.
Yeah, that was very fun. It was a good experience for me.
Yeah.
You you had mentioned different things about when we were growing up and the times and things, changing and the people and stuff like that. Like, do you ever have to maybe you're better at it than I am, but like, do you ever have to check yourself with the way that you joke with people? Like, do you ever have to remind yourself, like, how close am I with this person? Am I allowed to joke like that? Do they know I'm joking?
No, I
Okay.
kid you not. I'm gonna tell you this one thing. You know how like dad and Jamie and probably almost all of our uncles, and it probably came from Pop, but you know how they used to always say like, oh, like, he's out in left field, like, the guy is, he's out in left field. Well, now I work in the baseball and softball space. So I said this comment with a big league left fielder one day and he didn't get it. And I was like, oh shit. And I like awkwardly walked away, like laughing at myself. And I was like, I can never say that phrase at work anymore. Like it's dead.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, but there's
I
so
said to,
many jokes like that. I'm like, I can't repeat these things.
yeah, somebody was yelling somewhere, people fighting and arguing as we were walking to a store with my wife and I, and I looked at her and I was like, oh, look at this. These guys are all wound up over here. And she just looked at me and she was like, she said, what the fuck does that mean? I go, what do you mean? They're wound up. And
Yeah.
she goes, wound up? Like tied up? I go, never
Yeah.
mind. I don't know what the hell. I don't know how to explain this to you. Now I'm getting wound up. And she's like, you're nuts. I said, no, they're nuts. They're yelling. Do
Nuts.
you want to get nuts? And she was like,
Yeah.
you can't get nut, like eat nut. I go, all right, that's it. I'm done. We're speaking two
Yeah.
different languages. I'm
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
done.
remember when we would be walking with dad, like anywhere, and if people were arguing, like he would just randomly start yelling too.
Yeah.
And like not even words, like just like, like he would do like this crazy thing of his, and we'd just be standing there like, yeah, and like try and pass this situation as quickly as possible.
Yeah. I still I still can't help myself sometimes. Like when I'm with Elizabeth, if there's people yelling or arguing, especially if we're in a closed off area like on an airplane, I'll sink down and just go, shut up. And she'll grab me, she'll go, stop. I'm like, they're yelling. And you'll see them stop and they'll look around. Who just told me to shut up? As soon
Yeah,
as they
like
turn around,
what?
it was me, shut up.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
help it. I can't
No.
help
Or do you remember how dad used to purposely like call people by different names?
it. Yeah.
Like, where did this come from? Like,
I don't know.
you know, it's like it's just bizarre. Or your the story in your book about the guy popping out of the trunk reminded me of all the times that that dad would get out of the car at red lights and like try and prank people or have road rage. And
Yeah.
I was always so terrified when he would do that. I would just be sitting in there, or you would be in the front seat even, and I'd be in the back, and he'd be out of the car at this red light. And I think you and I both like we were just kind of like, well, I don't know what's going to happen here, but
Yeah.
we're just going to be in the car.
Just throw your hands up. Here he goes. Here he
Like
goes. Hopefully
this
nobody's
is
filming
it
this on
right
their
here.
phone.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
Yeah, man.
crazy.
I it's funny, the subject of like what's appropriate in like common room, like a common room sense of humor has been like a subject of conversation all week. It's been funny. It's just been coming up. Like Scary Movie is on TV a lot since it's the Halloween
Oh yeah, I
season,
know. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like I still think those movies are funny. And I was talking to a buddy of mine, he's Cuban, and he was saying like, man, he's like, I don't know if it's like a Hispanic culture thing where like we can like laugh at this stuff, like, or like if it's not Hispanic related, but he's like, I have like a couple of my friends that are white where if I'm watching this movie with them, they'll like, when the joke's made, like they'll like side eye to make sure it's okay to laugh. And I'm like, relax.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah. Yeah.
we had a conversation about, cause he's full Cuban, I'm mixed. What he no, this was the conversation. The both of us go on, and the same thing I'm sure happens to you. The three of us all go under the radar as people not thinking that we're mixed, right? That
Yeah.
like I don't know,
Yeah. All the time.
yeah. So all the time, and my whole life, and we have the same sense of humor. We're pretty lighthearted, but it's also kind of dark. Um,
Hmm.
my whole life, people have been making jokes about like different races and stuff like that around me. And if I know them really well, I don't need them to tell me, hey, I'm just kidding, because I know you're
Yeah.
kidding. It's
Right.
when you know what I mean? It's like we're joking and we're saying things that are outrageous, knowing they're outrageous. But like if I don't know you and you say something like that, I may do a camera check, and if there's no cameras, I may knock all your fucking teeth out, right? Because I
Yeah.
don't know that you're kidding.
Yeah.
So him and I were talking
Yeah.
about that. Like, people have always made jokes about like, Hispanics not knowing we're Hispanic, and we just kind of stare at them and just nod, you know. And I remember
Yeah.
there was a guy with us this week, and him and I were making jokes of we go back and forth, about Cubans and Puerto Ricans. It's our private joke. We
Yeah.
wouldn't joke like this out in public. People don't know, right? We're in our
Yeah.
privacy of ourselves joking around about it. And one of the guys was like, he's like, Kevin, he's like, I just recently found out you were Puerto Rican. I go, yeah. And he goes, is that why you've never laughed at any of my Puerto Rican jokes? And you just look at me and nod. And I go, yes. And he goes, oh,
Yes.
I thought the jokes were just not funny. And I was like, they were not that funny, but I
Yeah.
know you. And I know you were just kidding, but thank
Yeah.
God I knew you. I said, I thought
Yeah.
you'd get the cue that, okay, you're
Yeah.
putting it out there. You're not getting a big reaction.
Oh,
So,
yeah, yeah.
but it's funny how like what is appropriate as a joke changes over time. Like with all of the movies that are on TV right
Mhm.
now, the
Oh, yeah.
specifically scary movie, it's
Mhm.
we always laugh at that, and it's just like people can look around and go, is it okay to laugh at that? Is that okay? Is that okay?
Do you remember how dad used to check his voicemail on speakerphone on like the highest volume? Like, like he had hearing problems. Like, I'm like, okay, is the cauliflower like still in there? Like, why do you have your speaker on that loud listening to these crazy voicemails? And half the time it was these fighters, but like they were all unhinged, leaving crazy voicemails, and we could be in the middle of the store and he'd have it on speakerphone.
Yeah. Were you in the car when no, I think maybe, I mean, you can ask him about this. He may say that this never happened because he will do that sometimes if he doesn't want to tell the story. But I feel like if you were in the car, you would have been fighting with us. But we went to go visit Uncle Jamie, let's just say at a hotel. We won't say which hotel.
Okay.
We went to go visit Uncle Jamie years ago at a hotel. And there was like some guy, I don't know what he was doing, to be honest. He was selling something or he wasn't supposed to be on the property. Dad walks up and he was like, hey, man, just a friendly heads up. You might not want to do that here because the hotel security will arrest you for doing that. He was trying to sell something or hustle or whatnot.
Mm.
And the guy like immediately gets his finger in his face and he's like, you don't tell me what to fucking do. All this. Dad's just staring at him. And he's like,
Yeah.
just trying to help you. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just explaining to you.
Yeah.
If you want to do this, maybe don't do it in front of all the cameras. Go down the street. Like the guy's foaming at the mouth, screaming at him. And then he pushed that. He pushed him hard.
Mm.
And I was in the passenger seat and I saw it and I went, oh no,
Oh no, this is
no.
going south.
And yeah, the guy swung at dad. Dad slipped a punch, put him in a rear choke, and picked him up off the fucking ground. And then there are all these people in the car honking. And I'm like, why are they honking? I was like, he just swung at him. And now I'm getting mad. And I see them in the rearview mirror, like, like screaming in their car. And they're getting out of the car. And I get out of the car and I turn around and I just point at him. I go, stay in the fucking car. I yelled it so loud. I was like, hopefully this was loud enough for them to not. And the guy
Yeah.
just said, no problem. We just get back in the car, close the door. And I went, thank
Yeah.
God. Thank God.
Well, do you remember how dad used to preach to us, like if we ever had to choke somebody to make sure we guide them down to the ground so we didn't get in trouble?
But he did too. He laid him down very nicely on his side.
Yeah.
And we got the
Like he
car
would
back.
almost be irritated if somebody like let somebody hit the ground. Like there was almost like a humanitarian in
Yep.
him knocking people out. Like I'm gonna knock your teeth out, but I'm gonna make sure you hit the ground safely with
Oh
him.
yeah, yeah. Yep. Yep. He would pontificate on the cruelty and the irresponsibility of letting somebody's head hit the concrete. He's like, if you have to do it, do it efficiently. Don't kill the guy and go to jail and ruin your life
Yeah.
because he wouldn't leave you
Yeah.
alone. He's like, be smart
Yeah.
about this stuff. And I was sitting there,
Yeah.
I was like, if we try to explain this to anybody, they're going to look at us like, oh, Kevin and Taylor's family are all psychotic. I get it. It's like,
Yeah.
you just, you just grow up different. I don't know what to tell
Yeah. I
people.
don't know what to tell you. Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
different around
No,
here. It's real
no,
different.
I know. Very different. I think I've got a good closing story because I don't want to rob your day, but I think I've got a good closing story. I feel as though you were in the car for this. I'm not 100% positive, but I know I was sitting in the back seat and again, dad was playing a voicemail on his phone at the loudest volume on speaker. And it was a character whom, if you were in the car, you'll know who I'm talking about, but it's a he who shall not be named. But he left a voicemail and he was talking to the voicemail, and then all of a sudden he starts like getting aggressive and he's like either telling someone or starts basically saying he's like, yeah, and then I was gonna stab that guy in his eye with the number 2 pencil. And it was like, bro, what? Like the number 2 pencil in the
Yep.
eye. I will never forget this because I was like, one, I was like, well, why did it have to be a number 2 pencil?
Right.
You
Right.
know, like, you know, and then also, like, why did you leave that on someone's voicemail? And then you played it so loud. And I feel like you were in the car for that. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, he was a number 2 pencil guy.
He was. He was a number 2 pencil guy. Yes, he definitely was a number 2 pencil guy.
I remember a lot of that. I remember
Yeah.
a lot
Well,
of
and
that.
and I know you have more crazy stories than I do because you were older than me and got to go around some of these lunatics way more than I. But that's one story I will never forget.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all rushing back in. There was just like, I remember, I think somebody at the time was either picking on my aunt or said something to my mother when I was little. This is before you were born. Um, this is in New York. And, I didn't know what was going on. I was very little. So I had to hear this story years later. And for years, I said, that never happened. That was your imagination. Eventually, they told me, and time went by, and I said, hey, remember that time this happened? And they were like, that never happened. And I was like, no, no, you finally admitted it. You told me
Yeah.
the whole story. It's not my
Yeah. You
imagination.
can't go back now.
They're like, you were little. You were little. You're remembering things differently. I go, no, you're crazy. That's what's happening. But it was in a diner in Stony Point in New York, and the diner's still there. I still go to the diner every single time I go back there to visit family. But they had all the tables lined up against the front windows, and it looked like when the both of them walked into the diner to get this guy. It looked like everybody flew through like a airplane turbine. They just were throwing people like this. They're going all over the place. They
Oh,
finally got to this guy and they like, I can't even explain to you. Like it's just insane even saying it. Like dad was even stronger when he was younger. Like he was mental case strong.
yeah.
He picked the guy up by his clothes and like shook him like a doll and then
Yeah.
threw him on the ground.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I remember seeing that, looking at it in the car, and because it was dad and Jamie, I was just like, huh. Like, it wasn't really clicking. But I was also in shock because I was like, I can't do that to people. I was going through like the physics of it in my head. I was like, how do you pick him up
Yeah.
like that? You pick him up like a toy. And then I had one of my action figures as a G.I. Joe toy, and
Yeah.
I started shaking the toy like this. And then and they just left and got back in the car, never said a word about it in the car. And they're like, all right, you want to go to Hoyer's or Carvel and get some ice cream? And I was
Yeah.
like, either's good. Either's good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Dude.
Dad was infamous for that though, picking people up by their clothes. I mean, and I say this because one time I got in trouble. We took my friend Crosta, we took
Yeah.
out her brother's car. And so, and we were not old enough to drive yet. So I got in trouble and he picked me up by my shirt. And it was one of those moments where it's like you see it your whole life, but you don't know how it feels until it happens to you. And it, like in the air, I was like, ah, okay, this is what this feels like. Now I know. It was so crazy. That's why, like, it was so fun for me reading your book because all of those stories, like, just made sense to me. Like, like for the people that don't know, it'd be like, oh, like that's, that's insane. That's psychotic. That's crazy. But when I was reading it, I was like, yeah, like that tracks. This
Yeah.
all tracks. Like, this is how this, unfolds.
Yeah. Yeah. Oof, it was crazy.
And that was his other thing, along with, pulling people, throwing people in the air by their clothes. He would always use the drown you in the pool, which is so
Yes.
weird because we never had a pool. So I
Right.
remember thinking all the time, like, what pool are you going to drown this person in?
The public one or the neighbors?
Yeah, like, are you going to drive up to the Y? Like, I want to know more about this pool. It was like similar to the number two pencil. Like, are you going to
Yeah.
specifically reach for the number two pencil and where is the swimming pool? I need to know.
How courteous of him. He'll give you a lift to the pool. Pretend he's gonna drown you.
You know what else? I really want to find, but I know we took the videos on like a 1964 handheld camcorder, but all those videos that we made talking to that freaking mermaid statue,
Yes.
those are gold.
Yeah.
That
Monologuing
mermaid
with the
statue
mermaids.
still stands strong.
That's awesome. That thing's
Yeah,
gonna outlive us all.
it really is. Yeah, this was super fun and I'm glad we got to do it.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked. This was fun.